All right, it is 6 o'clock. Let's call the June 2025 Alameda County Water District Board meeting to order, please. Roll call, please.
Director Zakbari, Gunther, Sethy,
Here.
Weed,
Here.
and Huang.
Here, and Director Akbari sent his apologies. He has an unavoidable conflict tonight. With that, Mr. Stevenson, would you like to do the housekeeping announcements before we do the salute to the flag?
Sure, no problem. Just want to make sure we're welcoming everybody who's attending our Board of Directors meeting this evening. My name is Ed Stevenson and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public present in person who wishes to make comments may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda, staff reports, and presentation materials for this meeting are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. Again, thank you all for attending. President Huang, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
All right, next is salute to the flag. Director Sethy, would you lead us in the salute to the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Next item is public comment. I do not see any members of the public in attendance in person. We do have, how about online? I do see at least one members of the public online. Do you wish to address the board at this time? If you wish to address the board at this time, please raise your hand. I do not see any hands. Before we move on to the next item, I just want to say that if there are any members of the public that still wish to address the board as part of public comment period, I might reopen the public comment period. All right. With that, let's move on to item 4, consent calendar. Do I have a motion to add any items to the consent calendar?
And make a motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, and 5.6 to the consent calendar this evening.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Zakbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move the adoption of consent calendar as amended. Second again.
Thank you.
Director Zakbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Then let's move on to item 5.7, resolution accepting completion of Driscoll Road main renewal project. And I believe Director Sethy, you plan to recuse yourself?
Yes, my sister and I have a development interest in the property where the Methodist Church is located, and I've recused myself in the past. I'll do so again this evening.
I could ask on this project, Driscoll Road is,
Hold on, I think Director Sethy needs to leave the room before any questions or clarification, please.
That's correct.
I'm making sure.
That's-
Hold on. Sorry, John, we could get Director Sethy back if you think for some reason he needs to be back, please.
John, do you have a conflict, do you think?
Hold on. All right, so that record reflect that Director Sethy have left the room. John, what is your question?
No, I'm just worried. I want to make sure I didn't have a similar conflict.
Oh, boy.
And I don't think I do.
No, you don't, we do not show you as having a similar conflict. It should
Okay.
be fine.
And Methodist Church is on Washington Boulevard and I own properties farther down.
It's quite a ways
Washington
down,
Boulevard.
correct, yeah.
That's right.
Thank you. Then with that, item 5.7, please.
Okay, I'd be happy to go over this staff report. This is accepting completion for the Driscoll Road main renewal project. As you know, the board previously awarded the Driscoll Road Main Renewal Project to Kratos Incorporated. The project included the installation of approximately 1.5 miles of 12-inch and 16-inch diameter welded steel pipeline and other appurtenances on Driscoll Road between Timber Creek Terrace and Mission Boulevard, and on Paseo Padre Parkway between Gomes Road and Driscoll Road in Fremont. The work is complete, and the pipeline is in service. Status of the project was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on June 4, 2025. Board acceptance of the completed project will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 1.1, efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability. And this has been a project that's been very important to the board. The key members of the board have participated in a number of public outreach events and other things that have gone on. It's been quite a while coming, but we're very pleased to report that the work is complete. And we're recommending that the board by motion adopt a resolution accepting completion of the Driscoll Road Main Renewal Project, Job 21212.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
Only a comment.
Director Gunther?
Very good job. This was,
Great job. Yep.
it's kind of okay, it's done. No, it was a tough project. Staff did a great job. Making it, okay, it's done.
Thank you, Director Gunther. Do we have any questions or comments for the board for our members of the public online? I see we have two now. If you have any questions or comments for the board, please raise your hand in your Zoom app. Yeah. All right, I am not seeing any hands, so last minute question, comment? If not, do I have a motion?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Directors Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy, Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Can someone please go retrieve Director Sethy? Thank you. Thank you, Director Sethy. Then let's move on to item 5.8, please.
Okay, and 5.8 is a resolution accepting completion of the groundwater PFAS treatment facility Phase 1 project. And I didn't mention before, I'm stealing some of David Yu's job this evening. David Yu is covering for our Director of Engineering Technology, Mr. Awoke. You may note that we have a number of staff who are not here today. We are attending the AWWA ACE conference in Colorado. And in fact, we are presenting on this particular project. So I would love to keep the honors of going ahead and doing the brief staff report on this. As the board knows, the board previously awarded construction of the groundwater PFAS treatment facility Phase 1 project to Myers and Sons Construction. The project included construction of a 6 million gallon per day treatment facility for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. The project is now complete and the facility has been placed into service. The status of the project was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on June 4, 2025. Completion of the project helps meet the district's strategic plan goal 1.2, continue to meet water quality standards 100% of the time. And I'll just add that on June 4, when we reviewed this in committee, the staff reported that the facility has been, up and running for a bit. We've so far treated, as of that date, 775 million gallons of groundwater and avoided $5.7 million in higher cost SFPUC water supply costs. And so right now we are sort of well on track to meet our projected 3-year return on investment. And oh yeah, there's the protecting the health, our customers from the health effects of PFAS. So staff's recommendation here is to, by motion, adopt a resolution accepting completion of the groundwater PFAS treatment facility Phase 1, project job 10119. And one last note, we know that this is important to the board and to the public. Our intent is to do a little bit more of a presentation at the July board meeting when we have our staff back who can share a little bit more about how the project ultimately went. I know the board is pretty familiar with that, but we wanted to kind of do a recap presentation for the board. So we're planning to do that at the July regular board meeting. Happy to address any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Just another comment, another one of those, oh yeah, it's done. Which, you know, you just can't say enough on this one.
Yep.
And I'm glad the staff is out presenting on this project. Very nice job.
And I also see a hand online. So I believe we have at least one member of the public that has questions or wish to address the board. I believe is Mr. Abreu.
Yes, thank you very much. The completion of this project, I don't think they mentioned how much it costs. I think it's somewhere like $16 million or it's a big number, and it was a lot of it's a huge facility. It's probably as big as any PFAS treatment facility in the Bay Area. So this comes at a very good time. You know, here you are routinely approving a giant PFAS project. 3 days ago, at the county Alameda County Health Committee, they met and they had a very detailed meeting about presentation about PFAS. They heard all about the health and health effects, impacts, and the regulatory environment, and they proposed a PFAS task force. And throughout the meeting, they spoke a lot about Zone 7, about the Regional Water Quality Control Board, about even East Bay Mud received a lot of mentions. The Alameda County Water District had almost no mention because you guys don't get any credit for the work you do. And also the PFAS problem here was much lower. Let's be honest, much lower than the Tri-Valley to begin with. So you know we're just going down to the lower regulatory limit here. So now after all this, so a little commentary on their meeting. The county is late arriving at the Tri-Valley PFAS party, and they're seeking to roll in collaboration and coordination. However, a lot of other agencies like Zone 7 and the Regional Water Board and the Water Board Division of Drinking Water, they've thoroughly flooded the zone, as we say. They're addressing all available niches in the water quality ecosystem. And in my view, there's little room in the kitchen for any additional cooks. And it would be nice if they instead of asking for coordination with East Bay Mud, which has like 0 PFAS in their drinking water supply due to some quirks of geography and whatever, maybe they should come over to Zone 7, take a tour, and learn how PFAS really is being handled out here, how it's being handled effectively out here. You know, if they want to see how it's done, how it's done when it really works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu. Do we have any other questions or comments from our members of the public? If you wish to address the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. Mr. Abreu, do you have any additional questions or comments for the board? Your
No.
hand is still up.
Oh,
Okay,
let's see.
thank you.
Let me put it down. Lower. All right. I'll lower it down. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments from the board? No, then do I have a motion to adopt staff recommendation?
I'll move staff recommendation.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed, and Huang.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.9.
Okay, 5.9 is adoption of cross-connection control ordinance of the Alameda County Water District. And there are a few moving parts with this item, so we do have a short staff presentation on this item. But to kick it off, I'll turn it over to Bob Marshak, who is doing some more interim coverage work for Dan Stevenson, our Director of Operations and Maintenance. So Mr. Marshak.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Just briefly to introduce this topic, frame the issue, frame the item. The California State Water Resources Control Board recently adopted a cross-connection control policy handbook, or CCCPH. This went into effect July 1 of 2024, and this requires public water systems to implement new requirements for cross-connection control programs. As part of these requirements, public water systems must have rules or authority to enforce compliance with CCCPH. Staff and general counsel have worked to draft a cross-connection control ordinance that meets the requirements of the cross-connection control program handbook. The district's approach to compliance with this was reviewed with the Operations and Water Quality Committee on April 1 of this year. And board adoption of this ordinance will help the district meet its strategic plan goal 1.2 to continue to meet water quality standards 100% of the time. Tonight we have Will Vogel, one of the district's distribution maintenance supervisors, will provide a brief presentation on the ordinance and this agenda item.
Yeah, either one's fine. You're good.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Marshak. I'm giving a presentation on the adoption of the cross-control connection ordinance. My name's Will Vogel. As Bob said, I'm a distribution system supervisor. Next slide there. Oh, do I have the clicker? Thank you. All right. Agenda, cross-connection control definition. Current cross-connection control program we currently have in place. State Water Resources Board required changes for the CCPH, which is the Cross-Connection Control Policy Handbook, the CCPH Elements Enforcement Authority, proposed ACWD Cross-Connection Control Ordinance, and then recommendation. Couple acronyms here. Already went over CCCPH, it's Cross-Connection Control Policy Handbook. State Water Resource Board, SRCB, and the California Code of Regulations, CCR. Definition of cross-connection control is any actual potential, this is a cross-connection, any actual potential connection between a public water system and a consumer's portable water system and a source of non-potable water or other substances. Simply put, any unwanted connection that is not controlled connecting to our public water system. Examples include connections between water system and an irrigation system, fire sprinkler system, boilers, chemical fee equipment, so in many cases, businesses. Indirect connections, such as a hose submerged in a bucket, is a cross connection. There is a possibility to allow contamination into our system through backflow or back siphonage. ACWD's current cross-connection program adheres to California Code of Regulations, Title 17 requirements. It is to prevent backflow, back siphonage of non-potable water into the distribution system. Through this program, we perform surveys of existing services, new services to determine the degree of hazard, which entails the proper installation of what approved backflow prevention assembly is needed. Controls for these installations include testing, installation, repairing, and any modifications. And again, this is enforced through Ordinance 1999-01. The Cross-Connection Control Policy Handbook. Couple dates here we can go over. Assembly Bill 1671 mandated that the State Water Resources Board adopt new standards for backflow and cross-connection. This bill mandated the State Water Board to update regulations and establish minimum standards for the backflow assembly testers. So in order to test backflows after this, they had to have certain certifications. 2019, Assembly Bill 1180 added public water system protection for recycled water, modernized regulations to support recycled water use and certain criteria as it's becoming more abundant through, the state. 2023, State Water Resources Board adopted the Cross Connection Control Policy Handbook. This was December of 2023. This handbook is an ever-changing, living document. So it's not set in stone. Should changes need to be made, they will make adjustments to it. 2024, the Cross Connection Control Policy Handbook went into effect, and related provisions of Title 17 were repealed. This is as of July 1st, 2024. Water agency, in 2025, water agencies are required to submit a cross-connection program and plan containing specified elements by July 1st. So this plan will meet all requirements of the CCCPH. With that being one of the main points, that requires water agency to demonstrate how they will enforce authority should someone not follow the ordinance. Next slide. The difference between Title 17 regulations and the new Cross Connection Control Policy Handbook. As you can see, many of them are the same, which ACWD is following right now. The ones highlighted in red are the new requirements for the CCPH. I won't go through all of them, but as you can see here, the U certified testers and specialists, the difference there is they have to be certified by an accredited body, I guess we could say AWWA, for example. Backflow incident report response. There's a report and must be filed with the Health and Safety Board should one incident occur within 24 hours. Public outreach and education will now be required, and local entity coordination. A lot of the stuff we hear, but.
May I interrupt with a
Yes, sir.
question here? So I want to bring out for public knowledge what we discussed at the committee meeting, which is how many people that we have trained as specialists and certified testers.
Certified testers on staff, we have 6 specialists, 2 at this time.
Well, I found it interesting and impressive that we have that many people involved with monitoring the cross connection type issues in the district.
I want to speak to, but ACWD has been ahead of the game, it seems, when it comes to this. So,
Quick question.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that to do a back test, we do not, the Alameda County Water District personnel do not do the tests. We have to have a third party that comes in and runs it, makes the test done, that's certified?
no, we do in-house testing here.
You do
Annually,
in-house
once.
testing and bill the individual customers for that work?
Yes. It's part of their regular bill should they have, if they own a backflow.
And what is that bill, the fee?
I'd have to provide that. I'll have to look that up. I don't know the exact price right now. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Moving on, please.
Slide. ACWD becoming in compliance with the CCCPH. We are in the midst of creating the cross connection control plan and program, which is in compliance with based on the CCCPH. That should be finishing up quite soon here. ACWD will submit for the requirements, the cross connection control plan, July 1st to the State Water Resources Board. In order to do that, as part of the plan, as a requirement, we do need ACWD cross connection ordinance, again, granting the authority for enforcement to meet these requirements. The proposed ordinance, again, meets the requirements of the CCPH. It also is referenced in our cross connection control program. Provides the district authority to carry out its cross connection program. Provides rights to property, enter the property. We must have access to the backflow device in order to maintain it, in order to test it and make sure it's working properly. It also provides enforcement, required to protect. Some of this enforcement may include denying or discontinuing water service for those that do not meet the requirements of having a working assembly. It also provides requirements installing, inspecting, repairing, replacing backflow prevention assemblies. That said, should we have to make any, what do I say, repairs or anything like that, the ordinance establishes a customer responsibility for costs of any enforcement that may be needed. That makes sense. Nothing to do here. Bob, what's up next? Recommendation by motion, adopt the cross-connection control ordinance of the Alameda County Water District.
You, any additional questions or comments from the board? I'm not seeing none. I'll open it up to our members of the public online. If you have any questions or comments for the board or staff, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. I am not seeing any hands. Then do I have a motion from the board?
I'll move the staff recommendation on item 5.9.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Thank you very much, Mr. Vogel, for the great presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item 5.10.
Okay, item 5.10 is a resolution establishing fees for a self-read option of the opt-out of the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Radio Transmission Unit Program, updating the district's rate and fee schedule, and finding these fees exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And before I turn it over to our Director of Finance and Administration, Mr. Wunderlich, I will just note that we did receive a communication from a member of the public today, and it's been distributed to members of the board and staff. It's also been posted on the district's website for any customers that may be interested in taking a look at that. I see that member of the public here online, and so I won't attempt to speak for them. There'll be an opportunity for public comment in a little bit, but for now, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wunderlich, who can get us started here.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And before we jump into this item, if I heard the question in the previous item correctly, I did look at our rate and fee schedule, and the backflow testing and inspection fee is $87. And that's established in our rate and fee schedule. So I believe that's the question I heard from Director Weed. So now, just to give a summary of this item, back in September of last year, the board established fees for customers who prefer to opt out of receiving an advanced metering infrastructure meter, like a full meter, which means including the radio transmission unit, which is the piece that actually transmits the data through the cellular network. And those fees were adopted in recognition that AMI is now our standard infrastructure, and there are additional costs associated with going out and manually reading the meters for any customer who opts out. While those adopted fees are consistent with the fees charged by other jurisdictions that allow opt-outs, staff has received some feedback requesting options to reduce or eliminate these fees. And so after receiving that feedback, we did try to consider what are ways we could be responsive to that. And we've evaluated a self-read program and determined that it is a feasible option to provide a lower cost for interested customers. Any customer who would be interested in participating in this option would need to enter into a self-read agreement with the district. Staff is currently working with council to develop what that agreement would look like, and it would place a number of conditions on the customer in terms of compliance with, kind of expectations to participate in this type of program. And if the customer had multiple instances of not being compliant, then they would be automatically enrolled in the program where the district reads their meter and bills the full fee associated with that. So the proposed fee for self-read is $15 per billing cycle compared to the $48 per billing cycle when the district is reading the meter. This item was reviewed with the Finance and Administration Committee last month on May 20, and board authorization of this item will assist the district in achieving Strategic Plan Goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. So the staff recommendation on this item is by motion, adopt a resolution 1, establishing self-read fees for an opt-out of the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Radio Transmission Unit Program and updating the district's rate and fee schedule accordingly. And 2, finding these fees exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And so with that overview, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions or comments from the board? Director Weed?
There is a dramatic disparity in by manufacturers of meters on how easy they are to read. Xylem has gone and has developed a very easily read, big number meter reading. Badger, much smaller. I'm going to support the motion, but I encourage us to look if we have people self-reading the meters. One, you can train them, but there are meters which are more readily readable. And we may want to evaluate those, just look at the literature to see if it's worth our while if people are having trouble reading the meters.
Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that. These are all meters that staff are able to successfully read right now because we are manually reading all of these meters. And so we don't expect any issues with that. And as a part of this program, staff would make a one-time site visit to assist the customer in understanding how to read the meter. So we're hopeful that would overcome any significant challenges. We'll also require the customer to submit a picture of the meter when they submit the read. So perhaps if there are any issues with the clear picture, staff may be able to validate and correct anything.
All right.
Well, I'm not particularly thrilled with this item. However, I'll support it. I think staff's done a great job adjusting to adjusting. This situation is what it is. And I think for now, we'll move along this path.
I support the item as well, particularly since the customer is required to take a picture. I think that's proof of or evidence that they are taking the honor system properly.
Yeah, and staff's plan is for all meters, including meters that the customers will be reading themselves and the 99.99% of customers with AMI. So every meter, we are still planning to put eyes on it every so often, just to make sure everything is functioning properly. So staff, and that will include these, and so we will be checking these meters once a year. And so if any reason a customer is trying to play any games with the pictures and how they're doing that, at a minimum, once per year, we would catch up with that. And the agreement we're working on, the customer would need to sign, would make any catch-up amounts due and payable with their next bill.
With that, I will open it up to our members of the public online. If you have any questions or wish to address the board, please raise your hand. And we have one hand. Dr. Nishimura?
Yes, as General Manager Stevenson indicated, I had submitted written comments to the board. I trust that the board members have had a chance to review it. So in the interest of time, I know this is a long agenda. I will not read it. But I hope that the board members have taken my concerns into consideration and that the staff can address some open issues that I have raised. Thank you.
Actually, I did review Dr. Nishimura's comment, and he does have a series of questions for staff and the board. Would staff address his questions, please?
Okay, so I believe that's going to be on page 2 or the second page. One of the things, as I was reviewing these comments and thinking about is you know, the district does have some flexibility. Sometimes it's as much art as science when it comes to our customer interactions in terms of what interaction is appropriate to charge that customer a specific fee versus which interactions is it appropriate for that cost to be absorbed by all customers as just part of the customer service offered by the district. For example, like, let me just give a super obvious example. If a customer calls customer service because they have a question about their bill, we don't charge the customer because they called customer service, right? That's just something that's available to everyone. We used to in the past, we used to not charge customers any fees associated with collections activities. There was no late fee. There was no door tag fee when we need to go and put a notice on the doorknob. For about the past 8+ years, we charge fees associated with that. And again, those are all things where there's some discretion by the district in terms of what's a general customer service program and what's very specific and a charge is appropriate. And we felt like in evaluating this program, that things like a one-time visit to a customer property to help them learn how to read their meter, which is something traditionally that the water use efficiency unit would do for free for any customer to go out there and have a survey with them to help them, you know, measure how much water they're using and things like that. We felt that given the customer feedback and what we're trying to accomplish with this program, we felt that it was appropriate to not charge an additional separate fee. The customer is already paying $125 as a one-time setup fee associated with opting out of AMI. So there is already a one-time fee that they're paying. So that was, I think that addresses some of the questions. In terms of liability, we do plan to include a liability waiver within the opt-out agreement that the customer will sign. Obviously, the public and board do not have the benefit of seeing that agreement in this board packet. It's something that, you know, as this is a newly developing item that we're still working on and have just earlier today shared with council to get feedback and try to get this finalized and get this program going. Does the district need to replace any of these meters? No, we will not need to replace any meters. Our intent is that any customer who opts out of AMI will actually receive the same type of meter as every customer in AMI, except there will not be the radio transmission unit attached to the meter. And what that will allow us to do is in the future, when there's turnover in the customer at that location, we can quickly and easily, without disrupting water service, convert that to an AMI meter. It also ensures that the customers in these locations will have the same type of ultrasonic meter and kind of a new meter that will measure accurately just as every customer that's in the AMI program. You know, I think some of the other questions in terms of, you know, if there's a true up, will that need to be paid and so on. I think I addressed that in some of the initial presentation on this item. And so I think at this point, I can't say it's been to Mr. Nishimura's satisfaction, but I hope there's a feeling that I've addressed these questions.
Great, thank you. Do I already see one more hand up. So just a note for our members of the public online, if you have questions or comments and wish to address the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. And for now, I see Mr. Brew, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So it seems to me that if you're going out to read it, that might be to read a meter once a year, whatever, or do spot checks or whatever that is called. That would be that's done at no charge. But if you go out there and then you find a discrepancy, and then you have to address the discrepancy, then there might be that's extra work, and that shouldn't be happening, of course. And so maybe that's a reconciliation fee right there. And then if that happens too many times, you know, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, I don't know how many times, but if it's too many times, then you know, then there's something wrong, and maybe the agency, the district, has at its discretion, it can institute a policy that it says, okay, if this happens, if this problem happens too many times, we're going to go out, we're going to put in whatever our standard stuff, our radio transmission or whatever it is, that's the technology that we use to prevent these problems. So we're going to put in these fixes regardless of what the customer wants, because it's not working, and we have to do it our way because it has to be done right. That's my suggestion. We need to reconcile this stuff. It doesn't get these fixes don't happen by themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu. I believe that is staff's intention, right?
Yeah, there'll be, as Mr. Wunderlich pointed out, we're still sort of, working on the terms of the agreement that would need to be entered into to participate in this program. But we, would want to make sure that we're addressing those kinds of situations where if there's any obvious abuse of this program or failure by the customer to do what they agree to do, which is to make the readings and provide them to the district so that we can efficiently process their bills and things efficiently. If that becomes a problem, then we'll ensure that we have in the agreement that there'll be some remedy that we can make sure that the rest of our ratepayers aren't impacted by that sort of thing.
Right. And currently what we're looking at as the remedy is that they would be enrolled in the opt-out program where the district reads the meter and charges the larger fee. We're talking right now about 33 accounts out of 88,000. So we don't view this as kind of like a significant system integrity type of issue. We think it's something that we can accommodate. And actually, we think there's a pretty good chance that that 33 number will get cut in half as we go through this process with customers, as many will either through non-response or their own election will choose to receive the radio transmission unit.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from our members of the public? If you wish to address the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. I see a hand up for Dr. Nishimura.
Yes, Madam President, at the risk of being accused of getting into a bidirectional discussion with staff, I just wanted to say I appreciate Mr. Wunderlich's explanation about discretion in choosing which services the district charges for and which services the district elects to absorb as and have imposed, basically paid by the entire ratepayer collective. He did explain that in the past, the district through its water saving efforts would go out and instruct customers who requested assistance in how to read a meter and understand their water consumption as a service, as a complimentary service, which I think is a nice service. However, as a ratepayer who is investing in AMI, my comment is that that is part of the return that I expect when we invest in AMI, is that such services are not required, right? And that through the automation and the data that's available on the website through your ACWD account, everybody gets that level of service, and therefore the district, part of the return on investment in the investment on AMI is that such services are no longer required, and therefore continuing to provide that service sort of defeats the ROI argument for AMI. Now, I do agree with Mr. Wunderlich that we're talking about a de minimis amount, so now we're getting into the weeds. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do see we have another member of the public online. If you wish to address the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. All right, I am not seeing a hand, so with that, comments from the board?
I'll move approval of staff recommendation on 5.10.
Second.
Actually, I do have a short comment. So I would like to thank staff. I was worried about liability, so it's actually really nice to hear that we thought about this and you'll be in the draft agreement, so thank you. That does protect the district and our ratepayers. The second thing is I am a little bit worried about the cost, so I will ask staff to track the cost and true it out at some point to just make sure that, we are charging them
Yeah.
fairly and make sure that our other customers are not subsidizing this.
Yeah, so like every fee in our rate and fee schedule, we'll take an annual look at this.
Okay.
And the big X factor for the appropriate amount of this fee is how many customers sign up for it.
Right.
Because if the customers follow the process that we're developing and laying out for them, the differential in staff time between 2 customers and 10 customers in this program will not be that significant. So we've had to make some assumptions. We've assumed approximately 5 customers will enroll in this option, so the amount could go up or down depending on participation.
Great. I'll look forward to the next update to the rates and charges. All right, with that, I have a motion from Director Sethy,
Second.
second from Director Gunther. Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari, Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Moving on to item 511, please.
Okay, this is where the real heavy work begins this evening, although the board has seen pretty much all of this multiple times, but it is an important milestone. This is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2025 and 26 and fiscal year 2026 and 27 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program. So again, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wunderlich to get us started.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and public. The Board of Directors did review the proposed budget and the 25-year capital improvement program at a workshop back May 22nd of 2025. It was also reviewed, a draft budget overview was also reviewed by the Finance and Administration Committee on April 22nd. And at that committee meeting and then more fully at the workshop, we were able to give a detailed presentation, respond to questions, and receive some board input and guidance on the budget. And so what we have here tonight for you is to review and consider adopting the proposed budget and CIP, which will help meet district strategic plan goals 3.2, ensure cost reasonableness, and 3.3, promote financial transparency. And so Mr. Sidney Au, who's our financial analysis supervisor, will walk us through a presentation on this item. While he's getting set up with the presentation, I'll also just give a quick overview that we've been tracking very closely our spending this fiscal year compared to approved budget. The results from the month of May showed that spending was down in that month. And now I can assure you that through the first 12 days of June, it's high in June. But at this point, we feel that the risk that we will exceed budget authority for this year is low. I'm not prepared to say 0 yet, but low. But we will continue to monitor that very closely. And if we feel it's necessary, there is a board workshop on strategic planning scheduled for June 26th, and we'll consider bringing an item at that time if needed. But right now, we don't think that will be necessary. So with that discussion of the current year status, I will turn it over to Mr. Aum for the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public and staff. My name is Sidney Aum. I'll be presenting this item. I am the financial analysis supervisor for the district. Here is our agenda for this evening. We'll review the budget assumptions that are included in the 2-year budget, review the updates since the budget workshop, review the budget in a little bit more detail, but not too much in detail because as the general manager had indicated, the board had seen it before, but we'll review it again for members of the public. And also we will review the financial planning model metrics and we'll have staff recommendation at the end. So this represents the district 2-year budget cycle. The current budget cycle is the 2-year budget. It started in December. The Finance and Administration Committee reviewed the draft proposed budget in April at their April meeting. The Board of Directors reviewed the budget, the proposed 2-year budget at the public budget workshop in May. And here we are this evening for board review and potentially adoption of the budget. Staff will kick off, since this is a 2-year budget, staff will kick off the mid-cycle budget process later, early next year, and will present any budget changes to the board for review, starting with the Finance and Administration Committee in May, in April, and then the board in May. So we'll bring that, present that to the board of any budget changes. So as you know, the proposed budget includes several key budget assumptions. One of them is the forecasted demand. Staff updated the demand forecast to align with the water resources projection. Right now, we're looking at long-term demand at 33.85 million gallons per day.
If we wish to make comments, do you wish to wait until the end or complete your presentation?
You can interrupt me anytime, Director Reed.
On that topic in particular, the projected demand, we do it in dollar amounts and quantity of how much water. But the other factor which drives our decision-making is the consumption per capita, which is the residential component on a per capita basis. I think it would be helpful to have a side memo as to what our projections are. Show the correlation of the actual income coming in, but what the regulatory criteria that we're looking at, which is another driver.
So for budgeting purposes, we're focusing on, we are monitoring the per capita consumption, but for budgeting purposes, we're looking at the total consumption. As you know, the commodity charge is based on the consumption.
That's
so
right.
This is just for the.
It would be, I've seen very little on the other regulatory side when it comes to future projections, where we are, what the limits are. And that really becomes a bigger driver in some cases than does the finances. So,
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just gonna direct your memory back to when we talked about, compliance with the urban water management objectives, urban water use objectives, and our demand forecast and so forth. So what the board saw back then, and I know we don't have that in this presentation, but what the board saw back then were the results of our projections that flow from per capita water use and the various regulations that are in place now that won't really impact us for a few years. And I can just say that the projections that we use here are consistent with the projections that we use for our demand forecasting. So what you saw before flows to these results.
and maybe it should be in this, another way to approach it is on your assumption list that demand is not a factor in our budgeting. It's not even a planning factor because we're so far below currently and for the foreseeable future on near-term.
Yeah, I mean, it's a planning factor because, we have a number of years, but it's not indefinite. We will need to, achieve those urban water use objectives. Again, it's not really part of this presentation.
Understand.
Outside the fact that, those assumptions are baked into what's behind the scenes here. You're right. It's not stated explicitly here, but that's where these numbers come from.
Right, and then these numbers all feed into water supply purchase costs in terms of how much San Francisco water we need to buy, how much electricity we're going to use, operating facilities, all those types of things get factored in. And then, of course, on the revenue side, right? So.
And the other way to look at this is how much more money could we generate and still be well within the regulatory criteria? Thank you.
Moving on, please.
All right, thank you. So second bullet, we'll move on to the second bullet, the state water projects. Table A allocation is currently at 50%. I don't think that has changed. The proposed budget the proposed budget includes the 4% rate increase approved by the board for fiscal year 25-26, and the proposed budget assumes a 5% increase in fiscal year 26-27. SFPUC water rate increase 2.3% effective July 1st. And then the budget assumes a 4% increase effective July 1st of 2026. The proposed budget includes capital financing in the amount of $20 million per year. Starting in fiscal year 27, this is to fund our capital program. Labor and benefit cost assumptions for represented groups negotiating successor MOUs. The costs for the MCP group are consistent with the approved adjustments. And just a quick update on the retiree health savings account. Currently, there are 89 active employees enrolled in that plan.
I have a quick question. At the May workshop, and correct me if I'm wrong here, weren't you showing a 5% increase and then 4.4?
The 5% was shown in the long-range financial plan. That's out the 5% outside of the 2-year budget. So you are correct. It's 4% approved and 5% the 2 years after that. So here I'm only including what's included in the 2-year budget. So you are correct. The 5% is outside of the 2-year budget, but it's in the financial planning model.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. So the budget, the proposed budget include the budget revisions that presented to the board at the budget workshop. Just briefly, here are the 3 revisions that now have been incorporated into the proposed budget for you this evening. Shift the budget for the blender SCADA project up to fiscal year 26. Revise the year-end estimate to account for the updated election costs, and increase the cost for chemical budget to account for anticipated price increase due to tariffs. Okay, so I'll jump in a little bit into the revenues, expenses, and cash balances. So we'll start with total revenues. So overall fiscal year in 25, that's the fiscal year 25 estimated number that's expected to come in at about 1% above budget. Total revenues are expected to be 9% in fiscal year, 9% higher in fiscal year 26. So that's the 177.8 million, and remains flat at 178.6 million in fiscal year 27. Water revenues reflect updated demand forecasts as discussed earlier, new connections, and as well as rate increases that we just talked about. For property taxes, the 1% tax allocation for the next 2 fiscal year are expected to increase 3.5%. That's based on the county assessors data that they provided to us. I would continue to assume 3.5% in the out years. The state water contracts tax, the amount is based on the DWR's statement of charges. Interest revenue, that is based on recent earning, also the assumption for future interest, and as well as the projected cash balance. So that reflects those 3 components. The facility connection charges, both the facility improvement fund, the facility renewal fund, and the customer capital contributions. As you see, the lower budgeted numbers there that reflect overall lower development activity. For the grants, the district is expecting $16 million in new grants in the current year and the next 2 fiscal year. And staff continue to work to pursue any grant funding opportunities. Other revenues include property leases, sales of fixed asset, licenses and fees, any refunds from DWR, as well as in this case, the PFAS settlement. All right, so this shows the total expenses for the district. So we're at $200 million, the bottom row there. So total expenses are estimated 1% above budget for the current fiscal year 25. That's the $200.4 million in the middle column there. And that's mostly as a result of a shifted capital project schedule for some project. The projected budget includes an increase of less than 2%. If you look to the right, 203.7 and $204 million. So it's flat in the second year of the proposed budget, and slightly increases less than 2% in fiscal year 26 from the year-end estimate. Budget for customer accounts remained relatively flat. Administrative and general, that's a big dollar amount there. That's reflects a combination of factors, including the MCP labor agreement. That's included in this cost center, as well as assumption for the represented groups. It also include payment for pension and retiree benefits based on a more aggressive schedule, as earlier discussed with the board to get the program to full funding by 2032. Capital projects peaked this year with the acceleration of Driscoll Road main renewal projects, as you are aware. And finally, the debt service amount there includes the current debt schedule, which includes the 2025 bond. This shows the total district cash balances for all funds. Taking into account the revenues and the expenses that we just discussed, we expect to finish the current fiscal year about $4 million better than budget. That's 173 million. And then the ending balance you can see here for the fiscal year 27 at the very end of the 2-year budget goes down to 141.7 million. So that's a drop of about 31 million from the current year estimate. That shows a continued spend down of our reserve as reflected in the proposed fiscal year 26. We're utilizing about 26 million of reserve. Speaking of reserve, this shows the district's reserves and debt indicators. Debt indicator is very important key metric for the district. The key takeaway here is that the district reserve amount meet the reserve policy requirements set by the board. In regard to the debt service coverage, as you can see at the very bottom, the 2 row there, the target debt service coverage is 200%, and over the next 2 years, the coverage ratio is anywhere from 377% to 500%. So well above the reserve target. This pie chart and the next chart shows the total general fund expenses for the 2 years. This is for fiscal year 25-26 and broken out by labor component. As you can see here, sources of supply, operations and maintenance, and capital projects, including labor associated with those cost center, account for about 80% of the total general fund budget. And for fiscal year end 26, the general fund budget is $191.8 million. So we add up all the labor for this different cost center, that's about 33% of the total general fund budget. This is the same information except for fiscal year 27. The budget for the general fund is $193.8 million. Again, the labor components make up about 34% of the total. So we'll move on to capital expenditures. This is just a summary. The board reviewed the capital program in detail at the budget workshop. So for the next couple of slides, staff would just want to present the overall amount for the program. So this shows total expenditures to actual fiscal year, the current year and estimate of the 2 budget. As you can see there, the district anticipates spending $70 million in the current fiscal year. That's our total capital program. Does include customer capital contribution and extraordinary projects. So over the next two fiscal year, 67.7 in the first year and then 63.6. So that total about 131 million, the next two-year budget. This is looking at the proposed 10-year CIP by program. As you can see here, the average expenditure planned over the next 10 years is about $67 million. Some years, about 50 million, and it goes up to about 75 million in some other year. So the average about 67 million. The purple represented the main renewals. You see that's the largest, the tallest bar chart. That's represent our main renewals program. It makes up a large share of our capital improvement program budget for the next 10 years. And the green, we wanted to highlight the green as well because that's another big bar, long bars, and that represent other capital. And I will highlight that here on this slide. So main renewal program, a big portion of the capital program budget over the next 10 years. And then this other capital, the amount there is shown there is for the 25-year planning horizon, is not for the 10 years. The projects are listed here on the slide. Including the PFAS modification and treatment plant expansion, got the Niles, Newark, and the Thai pipeline, and alternative supply treatment facility phase ones included in the other capital. Right, so we mentioned we will review the metrics with the board this evening. So there's several metrics that are key for financial planning purposes. One of them is the general fund ending balances. This is looking at the general fund or through the planning horizon through fiscal year 2031. Looking at the low year in fiscal year 30, that's 1.6 million below the reserve target. We mentioned that the reserve target is well above all the reserves are well above the reserve target. As you can see, all the fiscal year except for that one fiscal year, that's out in the horizon. As we mentioned, the board will review the budget again as part of the mid-cycle budget. So anything beyond this 2-year might change depending on the board direction. The bottom chart shows the projected bill demand as we discussed earlier. The demand forecast here impacts revenue, impacts how much water we'll purchase, the operating costs, etc. Depends on this. You'll see a little slight bump from the current year to next fiscal year, flatten out for a few years, and then, like I mentioned, a new normal long-term demand forecast is 33.85 MGD. These two key metrics shows two things: comparing operating revenues to operating expenses. That's the top chart, and comparing our rate and charge revenue. Compare that to rate revenue, revenue requirement. So the key takeaway from this is there's a gap in funding. So, for example, operating revenue does not cover operating expenses, and there's a gap there is highlighted in the red number, negative dollars. So what these indicate is that the district relies on other funding sources outside of just the water revenue or the operating revenue. Those other funding sources ranges from property taxes, interest revenue, as well as the using of the reserve, as I mentioned earlier, proceeds from debt financing, and as well as other funding source. The top metrics here shows the debt coverage ratio, as I mentioned, and you saw this earlier. But looking out beyond the 2-year, you can see that the debt coverage ratios are well above the 200% target. That is the net revenue that's available to cover our annual debt service is well about 200%. The bottom metrics is the CIP and funding sources. This is looking at different funding sources that includes PAYGO, General Fund, CIP, the new debt. The PAYGO is represented by the green bar. New debt is in the somewhat a pink color, and the FIF is in the purple, shaded purple. And the orange is very small as the RFRF fund. So the PAYGO, as you can see here, we add all that up, provides about $32 million per year in funding for a capital program over the planning horizon. That's 32 million a year. Debt financing, we're looking at about 20 million per year in funding. $10 million per year comes from the FIF, and about 1.5 million in funding for capital comes from the FRF fund. Staff's recommendation for this item, by motion, adopt a resolution approving the fiscal year 2025-26 and fiscal year 2026-27 budget and the 25-year capital improvement program. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Would you like to go through the next step slide, or you want to get our questions first? Questions?
Questions?
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Director Sethy?
So if we can go back to slide number 14. I just want to express let's see here, 14. I just want to express a concern about including the Mission San Jose Treatment Plant, TP1, recommission and upgrade in our current outlook, because we really haven't thoroughly discussed this as a board. And I don't think the staff has presented to the board exactly for what purpose we would be recommissioning the plant for. I have brought up at a couple of previous meetings that there may be an opportunity to work with San Francisco or with Valley Water District on some of their future needs, where I feel that we could actually get them to pay for any upgrades that are required and do it to maybe joint specifications or joint interests. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think one of the things we talked about in the past is there are some items in our CIP in out years in particular where the certainty isn't all that great. Certainly the estimates are less certain in out years. But for some of those line items, and Mission San Jose is one of them, what we know is we need to do something around that time frame. If it's Mission San Jose, we've got our placeholder value. If it's not Mission San Jose, that means it is something else. And so we try to make sure that, that something else is roughly of the same overall value in those out years. So we know that nothing here is locked in stone. Really, the board is locking in the 2-year CIP, and we are, everybody knows that little things change as we go. There'll be an annual mid-cycle adjustment. But yeah, particularly for those out-year projects, we can't ignore these possible large costs and expected large costs. We also know there's going to be things that happen between now and then, including completion of our water resources master planning, which will help identify where's our focus going to be with regard to water service and how we're going to be, using our supplies. And so things like partnerships with others and so forth, as you recall, that's one of the sort of tenets of the water resources master planning. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But we know we need to put those larger expenditures out there. Otherwise, we're not being responsible. We're not properly, funding these future capital improvements or properly setting our development fees.
I have a second and third concern related to this line item too. One is understanding how much it costs on any kind of plant today. I think we're severely underestimating what it really might be. Could be $50 to $100 million to do a recommission and upgrade with new technology. And the third thing is, I don't think we have our priorities in proper order here. And I brought this up when we were looking at our CIP projects for the future. I really think we need to pull in the idea of putting a water softening plant down at Mallory Peralta or demineralization facility on the same old footprint that we have out there right now. So those are three concerns I had related to that item. Otherwise, everything looks really good. And I want to commend the whole finance staff for just a thorough presentation on everything at the workshop here, CIP programs, and everybody's doing an excellent job, in my opinion.
I might follow up on this slide. Alternate supply treatment facility, phase one. What is that? It would be helpful if we had some clear language. What is the
That-
alternate
I
supply?
will tell you, I was involved in that language. It flowed directly from the board's frustration with what it used to be called. It used to be called, non-potable recycled water, something along those lines. The board said, we may not be in agreement on recycled water. And that's when we said something similar to what I said just a moment ago. We know we need something, so we're going to put something in the CIP. So it may not be recycled water. It may be a desal. It may be some enhanced groundwater management. It may be some other things, but we know there's going to be expense there.
Oh, you mentioned non-potable, but the suggestion was potable at one time. And we've had our studies that show that there's absolutely no rational reason or judgment reason other than bizarre politics, unfortunate politics, to put recycled water into our planning document, particularly for the 25-year time frame. 3 to 4 times the cost of any other water supply. To still play with that is a failure of governance on this board.
And I'm just gonna say,
I
Next,
disagree, but
yeah, the other area is we had a line, some suggestions in there that we were looking at urban water runoff, which is the worst quality water you can imagine. And I would hope that would not be in our next, in our thought process during the next 25 years. Because a 25-year plan is an action plan in the water world. It's not long-term planning. So it's a failure of governance. Thank you.
I think we'll have really good discussion when we talk about capital improvement project.
Yeah, and the water resources master plan, because that's where
Yep.
those supply preferences and your
Right.
feedback is going to be important. Remember, our next big bite at that apple is in August.
Yeah, so, right, what you're seeing here are actually what we decided previously, and that's what staff used to do this estimate and bring it back to us.
And I
So we'll have another look.
have one other general comment on which slide would be best. We look at our revenues. Principal revenue is water sales. That's 140 million, up to $140 million in water revenue. Unfortunately, we don't match our fixed costs, fixed income, variable costs with variable income. So it's a far more speculative number than it should be in a well-managed district, a well-governed district. And again, it's one of the rate, it goes to your rate structure.
and once again, I'd just like to say I disagree.
I disagree too.
Same here. I think we're looking at the set of data differently, and I do agree
You
with
can-
Director Sethy and Gunther that our current budget
Fun-
is very well balanced and our rate revenue reflects fixed charges.
Fundamental principle of government finance or any finance
And
is to match variable
Dir-
costs with variable.
Director, I don't think this is where we should
Not a
have
rate
discussion.
discussion.
So, I'm sure we'll have a good
Particularly-
discussion when we talk about rate and charges
Matt.
again. So with that, any other comments, questions from the board? If not, I'm gonna open it up to our members of the public online. If you have any questions or comments or wish to address the board, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. I'm not seeing any hands, and for our customers that's online, the reason I am not calling for comments in the boardroom is because we actually do not have any members of the public attending in person. All right, with that, Since we're not seeing any questions or comments, do I have a motion?
I'll move staff recommendation.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Abstain.
and Huang.
Aye. All right, with that, let's move to item 5.12, please.
Okay, 5.12 is adoption of resolutions approving the Tier 2 Drought Response Implementation Plan and approving an amendment to the amended and restated water supply agreement between the city and county of San Francisco and wholesale customers in Alameda County, San Mateo County, and Santa Clara County. And for this one, I will turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides, to get us started.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Staff is really pleased to be here tonight, bringing this item to the board for consideration. It's been a journey, and I'm really pleased, especially to have Mr. Leonard Ash, the district's water supply supervisor, who has done the heavy lifting on this particular topic over many years, to come tonight and share a little bit more about what's been going on with discussions with BOSCA regarding our Tier 2 drought plan and an update or an amendment actually to our water supply agreement. So I will go ahead and turn it over directly to Mr. Ash to get us going.
All right, thank you, Ms. Heides. And tonight, staff wants to present two related items, two resolutions for board consideration, approving both the Tier 2 Drought Response Implementation Plan and approving an amendment to the amended and restated water supply agreement. Very long title, but the water supply agreement I'll just refer to as a WSA. Before we get into the details, I do want to provide a little bit of background on these two documents, just to provide the context for any members of the public that might be less familiar than the board members about the history here. So the WSA, that water supply agreement, it really describes that contractual relationship between the city and county of San Francisco and its 26 wholesale customer agencies. It describes how the costs are allocated, and it also includes provisions that affect ACWD, such as the minimum purchase requirement, and it establishes a process that San Francisco follows when there's a shortage due to drought and water supplies need to be allocated or rationed. So let me describe the process of a shortage allocation. Every year, San Francisco looks at available water supplies from the regional water system, and they look at the anticipated demand of their entire customer base, their retail sector and their wholesale customer sector. If there is a lack of available water supplies to meet those customer demands, then San Francisco projects a shortage. The next step of the process is they determine what annual amount of water will be made available from the regional water system to allocate to its customers. So that's sort of defining the size or the volume of the pie. The next step in the process under the WSA is what we refer to as a Tier 1 allocation. That splits that available volume of water between San Francisco's retail customer base and the wholesale customers. Now, both of these steps are described in the water supply agreement, the WSA, and they're referred to as the Tier 1 plan. Now, I do want to focus on this blue slice of the pie. This is really important. I'll bring this up again throughout the presentation, but it's that blue slice of the pie that's really of interest to us as a wholesale customer. The next step in the allocation is what we call the Tier 2 allocation. In this process, that volume of water set aside for wholesale customers is further divided up among the 26 wholesale customers. So that's where ACWD gets our drought allocation in the Tier 2 process. This is described not in the WSA, but in a separate document that we refer to as the Tier 2 plan. It's technically the Tier 2 Drought Response Implementation Plan. So the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 plans apply when there's a regional water system shortage due to drought up to 20%. The excess use charges that are described in the water supply assessment only apply when there's a mandatory restriction, a mandatory rationing set by the city and county of San Francisco. There are also other provisions that take effect when San Francisco declares a shortage due to drought. And those additional provisions include items such as the accounting of those allocations, the banking and carryover of those allocations from one year to the next, as well as the ability of wholesale customers to transfer those allocations to other wholesale customers. Now, these last two bullet points are somewhat important to keep in mind. First is that BOSCA, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, is not a party to either the WSA or the Tier 2 plan. And however, BOSCA is allocated or designated certain administrative duties in both the WSA and the Tier 2 plan. So BOSCA has a role, but BOSCA won't be approving either of these documents per se. Now, to focus on the Tier 2 plan, I do want to provide a little history. It was first adopted in 2011. However, over time, conditions have changed, and the existing Tier 2 plan as it is doesn't really fit in today's context. The Tier 2 plan was implemented for the very first time during the last drought. So it was implemented in November of 2021, and it remained in effect until City and County of San Francisco lifted that drought restriction in 2023. Meanwhile, the wholesale customers began negotiating in earnest an update to the Tier 2 plan back in 2022. And I'm pleased to say that those negotiations were substantially completed in the summer of 2024. So a mere 2.5 years. Now, I won't read these, but in the materials provided to the board, the negotiators developed 4 main policy points that sort of guided the discussion and the negotiations. And we've developed a Tier 2 plan that is a little bit more streamlined in how it allocates water. Where the existing Tier 2 plan added water and took it away, this new plan that's being proposed for board consideration today is an additive process. So the new Tier 2 plan will add water with each step, but doesn't take away water once it's been added to an agency. So in very broad strokes, before any water is allocated, we first determine the maximum allocation that an agency can receive under Tier 2, as well as that minimum allocation, the minimum amount of water an agency can expect to receive in a drought. Added to that, so that sort of sets the boundaries that each agency can expect. So with the first step, they look at the population base, and water is added based off of an agency's population. With the second step, they consider the non-residential demands of an agency, and water is added in step 2. With step 3, there is an allocation based off of seasonal factors. That could be outdoor irrigation, or for some agencies, agricultural use. That's important segments of demand profiles for the agencies. And finally, with the water that's remaining by the very last step, that's divided up among the wholesale customers to achieve what we consider a target allocation. And this preserves what's in the existing Tier 2 plan as sort of an ideal balance between demonstrated demands from the regional water system through past purchases as weighted 2/3 and 1/3 weighted off of an agency's ISG, an individual supply guarantee. So that's sort of the target allocation that the Tier 2 plan endeavors to achieve, provided there's enough water available by the end of the allocation process. So the long and short of it is that for ACWD, through this renegotiated Tier 2 plan, our allocations that we would expect to receive in a drought, as you can see through this example that BOSCA provided, which is based off of demands through the fiscal year 23-24, is that the district should expect to receive roughly the same allocation as it would under the existing Tier 2 plan. However, you will see that for other agencies, they may experience a more significant difference between the current Tier 2 plan and the plan we propose to replace it with. However, it's important to also keep in mind that for ACWD, our allocation is expected to remain relatively consistent with that regional average, plus or minus some percentage points, even as our demand profile changes into the future through our planning horizon. As you know, we are expected to use more of our ISG into the future. So the 26 wholesale customer negotiators did reach unanimous agreement, which was nothing short of miraculous considering all the various interests and issues at play, especially when you're talking about allocation in a drought. But concurrent with that Tier 2 plan, there were a couple of negotiating points that touched on issues that are described in the WSA. The two main points there are the Tier 1 plan, some of those steps in that process, as well as the issue of minimum purchase quantities. And I'm very pleased to say that while the negotiations were going on amongst the wholesale customers for Tier 2, we were very pleased to receive a letter from Steve Ritchie at SFPUC wanting to engage with the minimum purchase agencies on some of our longstanding concerns regarding how the WSA treats the minimum purchase requirements. And so concurrent with the Tier 2 negotiations were some issues important to wholesale customers that needed to be amended in the WSA. So that's why both of these resolutions are being brought together as a package for the board tonight. And so while staff is also recommending approval of both of these at the same time, I'll just focus on those two main points for members of the public who are interested in the finer details of the WSA amendment in its entirety. That's included in the board package. But I just wanted to highlight, for the sake of time, just these two main points. So for the Tier 1 plan amendments in the WSA, under the existing WSA, the excess use charges only apply during mandatory rationing conditions. If San Francisco declares a voluntary rationing, excess use charges don't come into play. Now with the Tier 1 plan amendment in the WSA, that is maintained, but we're also adding in that no excess use charges apply to any wholesale customer if collectively all 26 wholesale customers purchase at least that less than that Tier 1 allocation. So that's that blue slice that I showed you early on in the presentation. If collectively we're able to use water within that allocation, then if one individual agency or two go over their individual agency allocation under Tier 2, they won't receive excess use fees from San Francisco. So we think that that's a benefit to all the wholesale customers collectively if we're able to use that. We call it a family plan. The second issue in the WSA amendments is regarding minimum purchase quantities. And just as a reminder for the public, there are 4 wholesale customers that are subject to minimum purchase requirements. ACWD is one, as well as Milpitas, Mountain View, and City of Sunnyvale. So under the conditions that are in the existing WSA, the current minimum purchase quantities were last adjusted in 2009. Now, since then, the conditions have changed. Everyone has become more efficient in their water use, and we've seen that overall regional water system demand has decreased. However, the regional water system is still subject to drought, and there's a collective benefit to both San Francisco and the wholesale customers if we can improve the reliability of the region's water system. And lastly, there have been some minimum purchase quantity agencies who at times have had to pay for water they cannot use. So the element of this, there are 3 main elements of this adjustment to the minimum purchase quantity requirements. First is a reset. As was done in 2009, we've evaluated current demands, and we've also considered the investments that these 4 agencies have made in water use efficiency and in development of local alternative supplies. And so there'll be a reset to 80% of demonstrated regional water system use. So for the district, we'll see a 12.6% reduction in our minimum purchase requirement if this WSA amendment is approved by all the agencies. The second prong of this amendment for minimum purchase requirements provides a 1-year drought rebound. Now, as we know, our customers are fantastic in conserving in a drought, and that's true for other customers around the region as well. The minimum purchase agencies identified that when there's that rebound after a drought, the minimum purchase requirements take effect almost immediately once SFPUC rescinds its shortage declaration. And so for some agencies that are very close to not being able to meet their minimum purchase requirement, that residual conservation ethic that their customers have put them very close at not meeting that minimum purchase quantity purchase in the year immediately following a drought. So this provides sort of a stepwise increase, a 1-year phase-in, if you will, so that by year 2 after the drought ordinance has been rescinded, minimum purchase customers are then required to meet their full minimum purchase volume. And then the third element here is another family plan, because we're very fond of family plans. This one is slightly different in the sense that we're looking at the purchase volume of all 4 minimum purchase quantity agencies. And if collectively together, that total minimum purchase quantity volume is purchased collectively, then if any one agency doesn't quite meet their minimum purchase volume, they don't have to pay that penalty for that remainder if collectively all 4 agencies meet that total bottom line minimum purchase quantity. So for example, on years where ACWD goes over our minimum purchase volume for various issues related to production facilities, that additional purchases above our minimum purchase quantity can help offset if there are 3 other agencies that are very close but not quite meeting their minimum purchase requirement. San Francisco will look collectively at how all 4 agencies meet that bottom line minimum purchase quantity volume purchased. And then if collectively we don't quite meet that volume, then that penalty is only applied to those agencies that didn't meet their purchase quantity. And furthermore, it's applied proportionally to the total that all 4 didn't quite meet that bottom line minimum purchase quantity. So again, it's a benefit. It's only an improvement for the minimum purchase agencies in the amount of money one might expect to pay if we aren't able to meet our minimum purchase volume. Now, I will note that because minimum purchase quantity adjustments do have a financial impact, it will result in a very modest increase to the unit rate that SFPUC charges. As you can see, 0.13% to 0.72% is the estimated range of that unit cost, and that unit cost is applied equally to all customers from the regional water system, including ACWD. However, as I mentioned, we do anticipate that if this WSA amendment is unanimously approved, we stand to benefit from that 12.6% reduction in our minimum purchase volume, which will allow us to invest more in water use efficiency as well as development of local alternative supplies that will reduce over time our reliance on the regional water system. All right, and so essentially the WSA amendments that are being proposed tonight have been reviewed and approved on May 13th by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and now they go in front of all 26 wholesale customer agencies for their elected bodies to approve. And as I mentioned, for the wholesale customers, each agency is asking their elected body to consider both the Tier 2 plan and the WSA amendment. And so that is why for staff recommendation today, we're recommending by motion to adopt a resolution approving revisions included in Exhibit A to the resolution amending the amended and restated water supply agreement between the City and County of San Francisco wholesale customers in Alameda County, San Mateo County, and Santa Clara County, WSA, approving those revisions to be incorporated into a revised WSA dated as of 2025 and authorizing the board president to execute such agreement when final execution copies are prepared and distributed by BOSCA, and 2, adopt a resolution approving the Tier 2 drought response implementation plan. So that was quite a bit. I went very quickly for the sake of time, but I'll be happy to go back and answer any specific questions you have.
Questions or comments from the board?
I have one question.
Director Sethy?
So on slide number 8, where you're showing the allocation by agency,
Yes.
How was it that San Jose and Santa Clara were able to cut back so much on their requirements, their needs?
Yeah, there were a few, there were certain restrictions placed on San Jose and Santa Clara when the Tier 2 plan was last negotiated in 2011. And at that time, and currently, they are not permanent customers. So they don't have a perpetual ISG like ACWD has. They were interruptible customers. So back in 2011, they were treated, if you will, as sort of a second tier, second class of wholesale customer. Now, since then, as you know, in 2018, there were WSA amendments that provided additional assurances on the durability of their ability to access water from the regional water system, and further delaying San Francisco's timeline to develop and make a decision on making them permanent customers. And because of those changes, how those two agencies were treated in the Tier 2 plan is reflective of the anticipation that progress is being made in that effort. So basically, they were treated separately or less than last time, and those sort of punitive conditions in the existing Tier 2 plan are not reflected and not brought forward in the proposed Tier 2 plan.
I see. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. Comment. It's the Alice in Wonderland world of dealing with water and terminology. San Francisco is incredibly well protected against a drought. 5 to 6 years of storage. Would have to go 5 to 6 years into normal use with the drought, which we've never had, before we'd even run into the reality of a drought allocation needed. But there may be other contingencies, such as a major earthquake or regulatory criteria like unimpaired flows on the San Joaquin, that could trigger a water shortage over a period of years. So we use terminology which does not address the real circumstances. The farce continues. It's when San Francisco, the political decision to declare a drought emergency in 21. That same year, Santa Cruz had a waiver from the state for 2 reasons. They had a year's supply of water. San Francisco had 4 years supply in the reservoir. And their residents were meeting the demand usage requirements projected by the state, which the Bosque members were. There was absolutely no reason to declare the last drought emergency. It was purely based on politics. So when we live in this world of fiction and you do your studies, but what it does show is there are certain districts which are going to be impacted arbitrarily with major drawdowns in their water supply. Prisma Hills is a classic example. And hopefully, as we take this, we can look at the enterprise opportunities to take the water, this extra water, which is there, but allocated in manners which don't match anything, have anything to do with historic usage, such as Palo Alto, which has a water supply guarantee far greater than anything they could ever imagine using, but don't want to trade it off because it's a permanent transfer, not a temporary one. So there is an opportunity to do some water marketing. Hopefully we'll get this, we'll go through this game, put it down the documentation, and then look to see if there are some now opening opportunities. When we talk about minimum purchases, that comes down to Mountain View. Sunnyvale had 1 year where it was a failure on the part of the staff to realize that they had to buy so much water from San Francisco, and they ended up paying an extra $1 million for water they didn't use. But that was an administrative failure on the part of the staff in Sunnyvale. Mountain View has talked about dealing with East Palo Alto, different county. do some trading and changes. And East Palo Alto has their governance challenges, which continue to this day. So all of that plays out in there, and as well you're aware of. And so while we have this report, there is a disconnect from reality. And it shows some progress. Maybe someday we'll get an agreement which is based on our actual water supply situation and requirements. Thank you.
It's amazing they got 26 organizations to all
To
come
agree,
to
yep.
agree
Yep.
in the Alice in Wonderland world.
Director Gunther, any questions or comments?
We're better than we have been.
All right, so I do have a question on slide 10.
Yes.
So I think I know the answer, but I need some assurance. So it's great that we sign up for family plan, but I just want to make sure that we're not being penalized because we do, out of the 26 entities, I could think of at least one, if not more, of the water district that perhaps love their lawn more than money. So I just want to make sure that if one district did not use excess water and we go over the allocation for the family, only that one or two specific water agency is penalized because I don't want to pay penalties for it.
Yes, I can assure you. So that I did take the time in the minimum purchase requirement family plan to make that point. I should have made that point here with the tier one family plan.
Okay,
Is that, as you can see in this example, this is just a made up example here.
right.
But the allocation of each agency, A through D, is in blue. The drought use is in yellow. So agency B used more in a drought than they were allocated, as did agency D. If collectively, in this scenario example here, the total allocated was greater than what was used. So there wouldn't be excess use penalties in this case. However, if that were not the case and we exceeded our allocation, only agencies B and D would receive excess use charges, and only in the proportion to the differential to the total.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I can add two more comments on the irrationality of and the politicalization of the process. San Francisco has failed to and refused to look at desalination, identifying recycled water as being their.
Can I encourage us to go back to WSA, please?
Well, comes into the WSA because of how what their implications are of how they're going to do their water planning and how they do their allocations and what their future water plans are and and we end up paying 70% of the cost if they do a regional recycled water plan. It's craziness. The second is Bosca participating, in which we're a participant, even though we're not a beneficiary, in a recycled water facility in Redwood City, which would address the issues of San Mateo County. Hopefully in your discussions, when you go to your Bosca meetings, I voted against our participation because we're not a beneficiary, and beneficiaries should pay. And that's another violation of basic water principles and financing. So, back to the Alice in Wonderland world.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Director Weed.
Director Weed, I do want to clarify in case that anyone listening might be confused. You referenced 70%. By that, I assume you meant the wholesale customers collectively. And that's just an artifact of how rates are established and costs are allocated. For regional water system costs, they're allocated based off of use. So if regional water system customers collectively purchase 70% of the water in a given year, then the following year, 70% of those capital costs, for example, for a project are borne through the rates.
We're down to about 2/3 now, I believe, for regional.
So I am going to open this up to our members of the public online. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand in the Zoom app. I'm not seeing any hands. Then with that, do I have a motion from the board?
I'll move approval of staff recommendation on item 5.12
Second?
I'll second.
for both recommendations.
Same in the second.
Roll call?
Directors Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. With that, let's move on to item, yes?
Madam President, I would actually like to call for a short break.
Sure, it is 7, I have about 7:49, that's come back at 8 o'clock? 10 minutes?
More than enough. for
Okay.
me. Thank you.
All right, it's 8 o'clock. The board is back from our little break. So next item is item 6.1, board committee reports. Directors, do you have any questions or comments on the committee reports?
None from me.
None?
No.
Okay, and we no longer have any members of the public, so I'm gonna skip that part. 6.2 is operational reports. Any questions or comments from the directors?
I have to point out, what was going on with the harness over in Union City? I mean, talk about a significant drop. I mean, looks like we're getting Hetchy just total.
I mean, from the hardness map in the packet, Yeah. I'm sure Mr.
Great.
Marshak
Not
has
some complaining.
his thoughts.
Okay, yes, the, what's shown on the hardness map, I think, reflects, May, demands were met, TP2 was down, and when TP2 is down, San Francisco direct takeoffs are used to make up, as well as the softer San Francisco water through blender is used to make up, and that tends to move through the system, sort of the northern area and the central area. Kind of the influence of that overall softer water out of blender, the map reflects that.
Thank you. Any other questions? And I say thank you for the softer water too, since I live in northern Fremont. Any other questions or comments on operational reports? Seeing none, we have no staff presentation for 6.3, so that's me to 6.4, general manager's report, please.
Okay, I apologize in advance. Have quite a number of general managers' reports. Try and keep them short. We have 4 of them listed here, and I got a couple more after that. 6.4.1 has to do with board meeting agenda disclaimer related to technology disruptions. What the heck is that? So this is a heads up that staff will be adding. Basically, on the cover page of our agendas, we have some instructions about how to how to participate in the board meeting and so forth. What we're adding to that is a bit of a disclaimer, some language about what might happen if there's a technical disruption. As you recall, we've had a number of those. We have some gremlins that attack the boardroom once in a while. We want to ensure that if we need to continue and do the business of the district, that we can continue to do that, even if we have technical disruptions that that interrupt the public's ability to participate by teleconference. So what this language says is effectively our sort of default mode for public participation is in-person participation. We provide that teleconference option as a courtesy. And if there's an interruption in that teleconference technology, as long as the public is still able to participate in person, we're still legal and we're still good, then we may continue to do our business. And that customers are encouraged to provide, sort of comments and anything in writing ahead of time. They don't have to. We fully intend to maintain teleconference capabilities, but we just want to provide for the ability for that outside chance that something happens that interrupts our ability to conduct these meetings. So that's in a nutshell what that language will say. And so this is more of a heads up. By the way, anything that's in that language is language we can change as we go, right? So, but we just wanted to give you a heads up. Also give the public a heads up that that's the reason why that language will be added. Okay, moving on to the next item, 6.4.2, update on changes to board policy and inspection of public records. So again, this is just another heads up. This will be actually coming to the board at the July board meeting. And what this is, very briefly, there have been two sort of significant changes that have occurred since 2023. One, the Public Records Act itself has changed and it really sort of reorganized and recodified. But that means references to the code have changed. And the district now has somewhat different internal process for processing requests for public records by the public. And we use a new software platform to do it. So the board has a policy on the district's, obligations to be responsive to the public when they're making requests. And so we need to modify that policy. We'll update that policy. We'll provide more information about that at the July board meeting, but it's kind of a heads up that that's coming. Item 6.4.3, Fremont 4th of July Parade has been canceled. Pretty self-explanatory. This was late breaking and very not expected because we had actually been in coordination with the parade sponsors up until just a few days ago. We received the same notice that you all did. There were those that have been plugged into that. It's not going to happen this year, so we are hopeful that it returns next year. But for your own planning purposes, we don't need you to carry a banner or be threatened to be run over by a district vehicle in the Fremont parade. We'll of course have all the rest of the slate of activities through the summer and into the fall of various things that we do from an outreach and engagement standpoint. Plenty of opportunities, but that's not one of them this year. 6.4.4 Strategic Planning Workshop, June 26th. You have it on your calendar, but this is just a kind of a reminder. We have that workshop on June 26th. The location's going to be different. It's not going to be here in the boardroom. We're treating this as a bit of a retreat. We're trying to get you guys out of your normal setting and get the juices flowing because this is where we're starting to really roll up our sleeves in the strategic planning process. So we'll be up at water treatment plant number 2. The other thing is we're not planning on providing teleconference access to that. We're just not planning to do that. It's a whole nother layer of things that we're not planning to do.
Set up a barbecue outside.
There's a barbecue outside already. It's just not hot and there's nothing on it right now. So, and we weren't planning on putting anything on it on the 26th, but I'd say BYO beef. So
I'll come early as a cook.
26 June.
Yeah, it's Thursday, 26th, and we start at 5:30.
5:30.
Could be interesting.
At WT2.
Yeah.
TP2, yeah.
It's open to the public. We encourage public to participate, but it's not going to be here in the boardroom. So I'm just trying to loud and clear about that. And of course, our agendas and all our publications, notices, and will reflect all that. But I just want to call that especially for you all. Okay, we've got a few more that are so late breaking they weren't on the agenda. One of those is at desal or Newark Desalination Facility, the clean energy project is virtually complete there, which is great. We've got lots and lots of panels on the roof and the system's pretty well complete. However, there's been a little bit of a setback because we took the plant down on Tuesday in order to make the final connections between the new power source and the existing PG&E. And so the connection was made. When PG&E powered it back up, there was a short, caused some issues so that we can't bring the plant up right now. Mr. Marshak and the PE team and facilities maintenance are working hard to truly assess exactly what happened and what needs to be restored and fixed. But in the meantime, desal's down. The reason I bring it up is because, we don't necessarily need you guys to solve that problem for us, but in order for us to continue to meet demands while desal's down, we're putting more San Francisco water into the system in the vicinity of the desal plant. So that may result in customers maybe sensing differences in the quality of the water and so forth, and the sort of boundary of where the influence from the blender and desal may change a little bit. So as of this afternoon, we'd only received, this happened on Tuesday. And after this, as of this afternoon, we only received like 3 or 4 calls. So not a big, great deal of concern from our customers, but I just want to let you know that there may be some folks that come to you and say, hey, what's going on with the, the hardness in my area and so forth. Okay. Next up is Ms. Heidiss is going to share just briefly about some of the things we've been doing with this mad scramble that's happening related to the state budget, all the legislation that's going through right now, and there's an awful lot of industry organization activity to make sure that our voice is heard in the legislature and in the administration. So, Ms. Heidiss.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'll just touch on a couple of coalition letters that it's been a bit of a scramble, but we've signed on to or signaled our support for in this budget madness, as mentioned. So one of them is that we did signal to the state water contractors. They are going to be signing on to a coalition letter, and we have requested to add our logo as well. A letter to legislators regarding golden mussels that have been discovered in the Delta and are threatening water supplies in the state. That letter expresses support for including protections for water agencies in the Fish and Game Code if we handle or pass along mussels in our operations, similar to protections that are currently in place for quagga and zebra mussels. And that letter also requests funding support for mussel control, given that it's going to be a multi-million dollar undertaking for the implementing agencies, and also given this has been come to be without any of our control. So that was one letter that we have expressed interest in signing on to. And then also another thing that was a quick scramble, and we have agreed to add our logo, is a coalition letter being led by Aqua in coordination with others related to funding for the voluntary landscapes, or also known as the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Program. The Senate Budget Subcommittee is actually recommending cuts to $227-ish million in unencumbered funding, and is also rejecting the governor's proposed reappropriation of $125 million for this program. And our read is that it would effectively kill the voluntary agreements, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Program. And as you're aware, this would be a beneficial thing for our water supplies and securing a little more certainty around regulations, and also implementing a collaborative effort around the state's watersheds. These cuts would rescind critical funding for some of the no regrets projects for habitat and water supply that are basically supporting early implementation of the program, but would also be needed regardless of what the state board decides in the long run on the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes, or another plan. So that's a quick overview of the couple of letters we've signed on to, and I think it will continue to be an interesting summer with the budget as well.
Ms. Heidiss, I was reading that last week, the first boat at an inspection station up at Lake Tahoe, they discovered the golden mussels. And so for the foreseeable future, every single boat at every, I think there's 4 major inspection stations up there around the lake. They have to go through a high pressure, very hot, high temperature power wash to make sure that they're clear. Because that could be devastating to the lake.
Yes, they're definitely starting to see this and implementing a variety of new measures around the state.
I'm not sure what we're going to do at Quarry Lakes, but I'm sure that the Park District has some plans.
My concern is the Park District may not have plans, but the real issue, or an issue, if I might, if the golden mussel is a greater threat based on the ability to get its proclivity and its presence, might we want to consider not having boating activity at Del Val and Quarry Lakes while we're trying to get a feel on what's coming and what's happening here?
Yeah, what I'd probably suggest is if we want to kind of have further discussion on this topic, which is the reason why we're reporting on it tonight, because it's important to the district. If we want to have some further discussion on topic, we might put it on a future agenda. Certainly we enter into the agreement with the East Bay Regional Park District in terms of quagga and zebra. protection. And so that's certainly something we could talk about in the future.
Well, East Bay Mud has already shut down boating at the,
So,
what's their major reservoir up there?
Party.
Yeah, Pardee,
Pretty in Comanche.
yeah.
so can we make this as a director's agenda item request, please?
But do we have time? Wait for an agenda item now that we're in the boating season. Summer, this is, and if it's an imminent threat, which East Bay Mud has identified.
I think comment is
be
noted
appropriate to work
and
just
your
to-
staff can evaluate it. And if there's a need for a special board meeting, we actually have one.
Have one in 2 weeks.
coming up.
Yeah,
So,
and we do have the ability to call for a special board meeting if it's a imminent.
correct, 24-hour notice.
So, yeah.
May I suggest that this is of the nature that need not necessarily need a board meeting if it's determined that the threat is there. Staff has, I think, within their
I think we're done.
a hiatus on on the existing program.
I'm gonna say we're done with this discussion.
Board.
I'm sure staff will be looking at it
Yep.
and let us know what's the appropriate action.
Yep, thank you. And we have, speaking of chaos in Sacramento, we did send Mr. Wunderlich up there to stir it up some more, and so he's got a short report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I was the person available from the district, so I went up and was a part of a large coalition that went to go and meet with members' offices about the governor's proposed trailer bill language pertaining to the Delta Conveyance Project. And so we had 5 groups, and each group visited 7 or 8 member offices. My group, which also included others from the Bay Area, from Zone 7 and Valley Water. We visited 8 offices, including visiting with staff from the offices of both of our local assembly members Ortega and Lee. And so we had good discussions with them about the trailer bill and the project. And the real focus of this group was the affordability of Delta Conveyance compared to many other water supply alternatives. Because yes, the overall price tag is big, but when you divide that across many years and the total amount of water that will be supplied, the per unit cost becomes much lower for many participants compared to other alternatives. And so that's, we had a busy and full day, and it was great to be able to particularly meet with both of our local assembly members.
And again, that was a sort of short notice thing that was organized quickly. I appreciate Mr. Wunderlich making it up there, but again, it didn't make it on the agenda for that purpose, for that reason.
There was an item on the internet tonight, this evening, that the first committee hearing in Sacramento rejected using the trailer bill mechanism to address this issue.
Yeah, no, we understand that you know, there will be some process involved in attempting to get this trailer bill passed.
But the alternative is to put it in the regular budgeting process, which stretches it out another 6 months.
No, it'd be in the policy committee process.
Yeah, and if you're interested in more information, again, we had a fair discussion in our LICA committee this week. There'll be some information about that coming out, and then of course we can address this as another item as things develop. So, but I do want to move on to my last item, which is extremely important, and that's just a reminder that next week I am subject to jury duty. So I will let you know if I get pulled away, and I will indicate who it is that is acting general manager at that time. But I just want to make sure that I don't surprise you if I don't pick up the phone when you call next week.
Which location are you being called?
Superior Court, but I don't know the location yet. I find out on Sunday night.
I believe the governor has pulled the money and allowed $100 per day per juror to back down to the into $15 a day. So.
Oh,
you
so I
may
better
have
do
a
it now.
competition to
Okay, all
get
right.
those seats.
All right, director's comment.
I have one brief one.
I don't have a comment.
Okay, Director Sethy?
Yes, I just want to announce that today Aqua sent out the final of the paving standards best practices for elected officials and agency staff, which Mr. Awoke and I were both active members of this paving standards subcommittee the last 2 years. And I think we did a thorough scrubbing of this subject from every angle: engineering, public works departments, attorneys, finance people. It sounds like a very esoteric and boring subject, but let me tell you, it's actually can become very interesting. And so I want to thank Mr. Awoke for, he really did make large contributions in the thought process to this committee and everything. So I'm just glad to see it out finally.
Thank you, Director Sethy. Director Wee, do you have anything under director's comment?
Yeah, I did note that in the presentation, I sat in on the board meeting of Aqua, and they were somewhat apologetic, but among some of the members, that Aqua has not taken a position on the Delta conveyance.
Thank you. And I just have one item, just remind the directors that on the 6th, you should have received an email regarding Mrs. Kohler's celebration of life, date and time. Thank you. That's all I have. Then with that, let's move on to item 8.1.
So 8.1 is appoint additional agency designated representative for labor negotiations between the district and its employee groups, Operating Engineers Local 3 and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association. And staff is recommending that we add our Director of Water Resources, Laura Heides, as an agency negotiator, part of the executive team, well-versed in many of the issues up for discussion. You need to take action
Okay.
on adding Ms. Heides.
Do I have a motion?
Also move.
Second,
Second.
roll call, please.
Directors Akbari, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. With that, let's move on to item 9.1. It's closed session. Item 9.1 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators are at Stevenson, Jonathan Wunderlich, Amy Reeve, Stacy Q, and Laura Heides. Employee organization is Operating Engineers Local 3 and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association. Closed session item 9.2 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiator is Board President Huang, and unrepresented employee would be the general manager. With that, that's adjourned to the operations conference room at 8:22.
And just as a reminder, we do have an open session item just for the record, item 10.1 that will follow the closed sessions, which is on the agenda.
Great. All right, it's 9:05 and the board is back from closed session. Council, would you do the favor and read us back in?
Sure, I'd be happy to provide the open session report. The board met in closed session for item 9.1 pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6. Conference with labor negotiators, the agency designated negotiators Ed Stevenson, Jonathan Wunderlich, Amy Reeves, Stacy Q, and Laura Heides. The employee organizations were the Operating Engineers Local 3 and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association. In that closed session, direction was given to the agency negotiators. For item 9.2, the second closed session pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, the agency designated negotiator was Board President Huang, Vice President Akbari absent from tonight's meeting. The unrepresented employees, general manager, and no action was taken in that closed session. And that concludes the open session reports.
Thank you. Next item is item 10.1, consideration of a resolution approving Fourth Amendment to employment agreement with the general manager. Council, would you help us out on this one too?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And just for this item, on June 10th, 2021, the district entered into an employment agreement with Ed Stevenson to employ him as the district's general manager. On June 9th, 2022, on June 8th, 2023, and on June 13th, 2024, the district and the general manager entered into the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and Third Amendment to the employment agreement to increase the general manager's compensation based on the general manager's performance evaluation. The district and the general manager desire to amend the employment agreement to increase the general manager's compensation, which is and will remain at step 5 of the salary schedule with a 6% cost of living adjustment for a total annual salary of $342,577, effective the pay period that includes July 1, 2025. All other terms and conditions of the employment agreement will remain the same. And so the board may discuss this item, the board may consider a motion to adopt the resolution approving the Fourth Amendment to the employment agreement between the district and Ed Stevenson.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move for the Fourth Amendment.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Director Akbari, Sethy, or I'm sorry, Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. So with that, I think we're done.
If I could just say, just quickly, thank you all. This is the most awkward thing ever for me, and I appreciate this board. I appreciate this agency, and I appreciate working with all of you, and I thank you for your trust in me. So with that.
All right, we appreciate your work also. With that, I'll say the meeting is adjourned at 9:08 p.m.